Angela Huckabee. She's a bikini competitor from Alaska. She's going to be on stage in 7 weeks.
Nice.
She's natural too. Yeah, she's competing in IPL. Have you ever heard of that organization?
I have not. Man. There's so many organizations now. It's wild.
I know, man, but they have classic physique, and I think that I might do one of these shows that this organization has in Alaska. I don't know.
Is
I'm
it a
looking at that
natural
one, and I'm looking
federation?
at what's up.
Is it a natural federation then?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They test polygraph. They test they do polygraph and urine test.
Did you know that I'm promoting a show next year?
Yeah. Yeah. We talked about it just a little bit,
Yeah, yeah, you got to do
like
that.
a while ago for a split second.
Yeah, you got to do my show.
Okay, I'll do your show if you come guest pose at my show because I'm hosting a show.
Hey, well about it, man. Rock and roll, rock and roll.
Heck yeah, man. All right, let's go. So Angela would like to say, I can't wait for this segment. I want to hear all about carnivore peak week. What do we do differently and how the body doesn't need carbs to achieve the same results? I want to be pure carnivore when I get on stage. So um, for her, she's not competing for a pro card so much as she's a carnivore for health reasons, right?
Yeah,
Like a lot of the people that I train. I'm of the same mindset until that I'm 2 weeks out, and then I'm like, fuck all that. Okay, we're putting carbs in. We're whatever. Let's see if we can gain 10 pounds and get as big as possible and win this show. Like that's kind of where my mentality is at when I get to 2 weeks. So for somebody that wants to like minimize all plant products and just be as pure as possible, would you have anything extra to add, like in her case?
yeah, man, that's pretty much what I do. So, like, I consider carnivore just a subset of keto. So, like, I'm not having carbs during my peak week at all. I'll typically start. So, I don't know how familiar they are with my protocol, but by the time I start getting ready for stepping on stage, my fat ratio is typically, 70% of my calories between 70 and 75% of my calories are coming from fat at that point. My protein's a little bit lower. So I'll typically start increasing that intake on refeed days, usually about 3 or 4 weeks out of the actual peak week. So I can kind of see how my body adjusts, do those trial peak
Mm-hmm.
weeks. And I'll start with, again, like I said, about 30% increase over baseline. So if I'm going off memory, I think last competitive season, I was around 1,700 calories, 1,700 calories at baseline. And then on the day of the refeed, I would bump that up by 30 or 40%, coming from increase in fats and proteins. What I did find during my peak week is I was ridiculously lean. So like my body could handle a lot more food than just a single refeed day. So one thing that
Right.
I started doing was I would have pretty much an additional pound of lamb covered in duck fat every day of the
Oh.
week, and then a refeed pizza, fathead pizza, not a carbohydrate pizza, but a fathead pizza the day before the
Yeah,
show,
yeah.
and that worked out really, really well for me. So having that increased fat and protein from the lamb and duck fat, which is pretty fatty anyways, the lamb is, that is, and then the refeed itself would be that fathead pizza with an increase of about 2,000 milligrams of sodium over baseline from anchovies, and then a little bit of cheese and whatnot in that, also covered in some type of ground beef, usually lamb or venison or beef, and then that would be my refeed meal. But then during the day of the show, I would pretty much just have keto breaks prior to stepping on stage. But you could
For
emulate the
sure.
same thing if you wanted to go straight up carnivore using like just a fatty meat source. Like you could do, um, like a cod liver would be a really good option, I would think, during the day of the show. So if you wanted to go completely carnivore, not use keto bricks or something like that, then you could do something like cod liver. That's going to give you a good bolus of fat, a little bit of protein. You can make sure your sodium's tracked with that, and then you'd be able to fill out perfectly fine.
Beautiful. Yeah, she lives in Alaska, so she won't have any problem sourcing any of that. She certainly won't complain about pizza, knowing her. So,
Yeah, yeah. In Alaska, I mean, shoot, you get quality cod liver right there, so you're good to go.
seriously, thanks, man. Cool. Danielle Fisher is a WNBF pro, and she has been carnivore for quite some time. She's got some gut issues, and so she's been on the carnivore diet for a while for autoimmune reasons. But she would like to ask, does stevia need to cut out during peak week? So do you think that there's any water retention or like insulin issues that we might need to be concerned about with artificial sweeteners, stevia in particular?
I don't notice it so much with stevia personally. With sucralose, I absolutely do. So, like people that are taking in sucralose, they'll
Mm,
typically have more fluid retention, more intestinal fluid retention, which is going to cause more
yeah.
bloat on stage. So I would certainly minimize sucralose, like Splenda-based products, acesulfame, potassium, things like that. I don't notice any excessive fluid retention when I'm having stevia, for me personally, but other people may. So that'd be kind of one of those things where you just want to test it and see if you notice a difference or not. But usually stevia and monk food are pretty safe bets. Um, I know some people would have like issues with erythritol. Anything that's going to cause GI distress, you want to certainly avoid, independent from the fluid retention, but just GI distress in general. So like a lot of the people have issues with allulose. They'll have like a GI threshold with allulose. So that'd be kind of one of the things you'd want to just test and see if you have a sensitivity to it or not. Because the last thing you want to do is be standing on stage and have any kind of GI disruptions there.
Definitely. Yeah, especially for her, I think that advice is a little more pertinent than it is to somebody like me, for example, because I do consume sucralose actually
Yeah.
every day. Not because I am thrilled about it being in the supplements that I'm taking, but
Most of
metabolic
them
nutrition
have,
is, what's that?
most of them have, I mean, that's what most supplements use to sweetener is the sucralose.
Yeah, it's in like 99.9% of artificially sweetened supplements. And actually, when I did the lion diet, that was the hardest thing to cut out was sucralose, not
Yeah.
caffeine, not anything else, but specifically sucralose. I didn't realize how addictive it was until then. But yeah, personally, I'm consuming it every day, and I don't see any. I'm not noticing any downsides to it. Like I'm not dead, so
Yeah.
you know I'm not noticing any gut issues or anything with it, but like I think in her case it might be a little more important. So thanks for
And
answering it that way.
a lot of people, especially like the carnivore, low carb, keto space, they try and do this fear mongering game with artificial sweeteners, and I'm not a fan of that either. And
No.
yes, there are studies that showcase that if you have sucralose, it's going to disrupt your gut microbiome. But if you look at those studies, they're all done with like an amount of sucralose that nobody in their right mind would likely consume in a
Yeah,
day. So like you got to take that into account too. Do I think sucralose is going to kill you? By all means, no. I'll take in stuff that has sucralose from time to time. If I've got the option, I try and get something with stevia or monk food or a natural sweetener
for
alternative in
sure.
there. But like I'm not going to lose any sleep over having something with sucralose. But I do think it causes GI threshold for a lot of people, and it can cause some fluid retention. Like I notice a little bit of fluid retention with it. I don't notice it on the day to day in the building phase because there are so many variables. But like when I'm super dialed in for a prep, I can notice a little bit of additional fluid retention from it.
Awesome. Thanks for that, man. Uh, I would also add that. Insulin. Do you think it spikes insulin? I've never noticed that. I've never felt like a sugar crash like a lot of people say there is, and so I'm just going to assume that that's dependent on the person, because there are a lot of coaches that swear that it spikes your insulin just like sugar, and then there's I certainly don't feel like it does, and it hasn't, it doesn't knock me out of ketosis or anything. So
Yeah, it's certainly not going to have as profound an impact on blood sugar. So, you're not going to have the spike in blood sugar that you would from, a sucrose or something like that. But, there is a cephalic phase of insulin response. So, if you consume something sweet, your brain doesn't necessarily recognize that it is not sugar. So, you may excrete some insulin in that regard, but it's going to be, minor compared to what you would experience if you were actually consuming sugar. But it may
yeah,
be enough so to trigger the cravings for more sweet things. So, at that point, it kind of becomes what's more sustainable for you. Like if having sweetened things are increasing your desire for more sweet things, that's probably going to make dieting down harder. So I would minimize that if that was an issue for somebody.
definitely. Great advice. Thanks for that. Um, what about bone broth? Does that break the fast?
I mean, technically, there's calories in bone broth, so technically it would break a fast. But a lot of people get hung up on, what does and does not break a fast. Like if you're dieting
Yeah,
down, especially for a show, then you're in a deficit anyways. So like a lot of the benefits that people are seeking with extended fasting or intermittent fasting, you're getting by simply being in a deficit. So you don't really need to get hung up on what does and does not break a fast if you're a competitor that's in a prep anyways.
yeah, awesome. She has questions about sodium and exogenous ketones, and actually, I'm gonna be using exogenous ketones in my peak week, and so I think that's just a good time to segue into that. Actually, you know what? Yeah, there's a couple other questions that are non-prep related, so let's stay on topic with contest prep. Okay, so my peak week, is it okay if I run it by you and just let me know what you think?
Rock and roll, man. Rock and roll.
Okay, I guess a little bit of context first. So the peak weeks that I have done in the past with carbohydrate loading have been rapid backloading because I am a very very good responder to rapid backloading. Some people do great with it, right? And some people, would you agree with this? Some people do great with it, and some people respond not as well. So some people can really pack away glycogen on the Friday before stepping on stage and gain 5 pounds, and it's a good hard 5 pounds. And then there's some athletes that'll completely spill over with the same amount of carbohydrate intake. Have you noticed that?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like I know some people that will literally consume 800 grams carbohydrates the day before the show. So I mean, it's totally dependent upon the individual what they do and don't respond well to.
For
When
sure.
I was using carbs, I don't ever think I got that aggressive with the carb intake. But you said you're doing around 500 grams. You said.
No, no. So in the past, what I've done is this was in 2019. I missed my pro card by one guy. I was so close, man. It was in Edmonton. My wife was
Mhm.
pregnant with our daughter, and we kind of put everything into it. And I came so damn close, man. My coach actually did the same show, and we split categories. I beat him in bodybuilding, and he beat me in men's physique. He's a men's physique pro. But
Nice.
anyway, yeah, he's a big fan of rapid backloading, and that's kind of what I found had worked best at that point when I was using carbs. And so uh, we would, at, so we would deplete for 4 days, right? And then that creates rubber band effect. And so your body is really wanting those carbs because it misses them, and then now it's more efficient at storing them. And we see that, and we see that scientifically with the carnivore diet because you and I both know that we can store glycogen the longer that we're fat adapted, right?
Hmm.
Your body becomes more efficient with that glycogen. So my refeeds on Fridays would be up to anywhere from 800 to 900 grams of carbs, all from sweet potatoes.
Hmm.
And I'd pack it away just fine and gain about 4 or 5 pounds every time. So we started seeing how far we could go with that. And we started pushing my refeed up to Wednesday. And I was eating 1,200 grams of carbs. My brother tried to do the same thing with me one time when we were in LA doing this, and he was throwing up. His gut was a wreck after it. But like I was able to actually get all these sweet potatoes down. So I went from the best shape of my life to the worst shape of my life the next morning because I completely spilled over, which my coach told me what happened. So I didn't lose my shit, right?
Hmm.
So I'm spilled over. He's like, that's okay. Go to the gym and get a pump. Okay. So then that kind of cleaned up the spillover. And then from there, it's just a matter of staying full. And it's him and me on video like a couple times a day, and him saying, eat a sweet potato, go do this, go do that. And the next couple of days were around 250 grams of carbs on Thursday, and then 150 grams of carbs on Friday. But then I can't even look at carbs, man. Like seriously, like we're on a very very fine line, right? I'm holding a shitload of glycogen right now, and it's great because the morning of the show, I'm giant, right? Best shape of my life. But my glycogen fulls are my glycogen stores are still full, and so I'm flat and watery every single time later in the day. That's been my pickle, and that's kind of why I threw in the towel with it. And so then when I did my next four shows a couple years later, after going keto carnivore and realizing that cutting was much easier and just life was much better on being keto carnivore. I had no interest in putting carbs back in my diet ever, so I did three shows, and that was better than my physique before. And then I added carbs into my last show, and I got that trophy right there. That's how I got it because it was a non-tested show. Yeah, and I was like, man, okay, like I don't care if I'm retaining water. Like the half of the guys at the show have gyno anyway, and so I'm like, I'm just gonna fill out as big as I can. So I just ate as many sweet potatoes as I could, dude. And I got up to about 1,000 grams of carbs somewhere around there. And my body hadn't seen carbs in forever, right? And so, yeah, it felt like absolute crap. But I was noticeably bigger and noticeably more watery. But it's what the judges wanted. I was happier with my previous physique than I was with that. So anyway, um, I for the open natural guest posing, I went back to a keto carnivore peak week, and so just kind of standard your approach there, nothing crazy. And I was just going to do the same thing this year, man. And then the more I've been working with Richard Smith, who is my co-host of this show, um, I have just been I've become fascinated about his peak week and how he does it, and it's actually not too far off from what I was doing before. So the only thing that he really adds to it is he goes so far as to deplete fats before that. So he does a fat refeed a couple days before, and then a carb refeed, very similar to what I just described. And then on show day, his work around my problem is that that's when he puts in exogenous ketones, because exogenous ketones are burned as a primary fuel source, even over glycogen. I didn't know that. So if your body has a choice between glucose and exogenous and ketones for fuel, whether exogenous or your body makes them, it's gonna use ketones. It won't make its own ketones if it has glucose in your system, right? So he'll gain a couple more pounds doing that. He gained 17 pounds on his last peak week, and he's natural. So that's
Is
what I
the
plan
same
on
Richard
doing these
Smith
next
that
2 weeks.
I'm familiar with in the UK?
Yes, sir.
Okay, yeah, yeah, he's a good guy.
Yeah, yeah. I'm sorry, I forgot that you know him. You were
Yeah,
you were you were speaking at Carnivoreathon with me.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, there's a lot of different ways to skin a cat, as the saying goes. For me, like
Yeah,
I don't want the variables of the carbohydrates. I don't think it brings a better look to me. And then when I mean, like, also it kind of depends on the federation. So, like as you said, when you're an NPC non-tested show, they're typically rewarding, size over conditioning. In the WNBF federation that I'm typically competing in, like they want to see striated glutes, man. Like you want to be able to grade cheese on your ass cheeks. Like you want to be dialed in. You want to be filled out and
yeah.
full though too. But like
And
for
if
me,
and if
I always look better when I don't have that excessive water retention as a variable.
mhm.
Excessive water retention. You want as much fluid in the actual muscle tissue as possible, but you don't want it to spill over and it reside in the subcutaneous layer of skin. And like for me, if I'm having the fats and proteins and staying hydrated, that's one thing a lot of competitors do. Is they'll do like a water depletion, which is the stupidest thing in my opinion, because like your body is comprised of primarily water. So like when you start dehydrating
Yeah,
yourself and then you start doing a water load, like that's just risky business. Like that's not healthy at that point. So
no.
I never recommend cutting water. I don't ever recommend diluting.
Bodybuilding isn't healthy in the first place, and that just makes it more unhealthy.
Yeah, yeah, like that's no bueno. So I try and stay hydrated the full time, like all the time, at all times. But for me, I'm manipulating more so the sodium load because when you look at manipulations that you make with sodium, your body is
Mhm.
is going to excrete aldosterone. It's going to excrete whatever it needs to, or uphold whatever it needs to from a hormonal standpoint to regulate your total blood serum sodium levels. And if you jack that up, like your body will equalize and regulate. And there's normally about 36 to 48 hours for things to regulate. So you've got a finite period of time in which you can, you know, peak, so to speak, and finesse and really bring forth a certain look. That's why, like a lot of competitors, they'll look great, 12 hours post show, 12 hours before show, but have a hard time nailing it. It's because the manipulations they make are they're acute in nature. They don't last forever. So you've got to time that electrolyte hormonal balance properly. And for
Yeah,
me, if I'm not playing around with the fluid levels and I'm just staying consistently hydrated, but then I have a bolus of sodium in a well-timed state, then it basically has that finite period of time where I can bring in any of the subcutaneous fluid into the actual muscle tissue. So my skin appears thinner, my muscles appear fuller, my vascularity is more pronounced, but I don't have the carbohydrates to contend with, so I don't really risk spilling over.
yeah. That's that's a much safer way to do it. I'm,
Yeah.
I'm glad that this is a guest posing gig. So guest posers, as you know, typically nobody expects you to have striated glutes. They expect that of the competitors. I do have striated glutes now. So yeah, Taylor and I were doing our meeting, our Sunday meeting that we do. Like we go over our because if we don't do this, man, we are arguing all week. So we have to have one time a week, man, where we get everything on paper. Okay, James is doing this, Everly's doing this, you're doing this, I'm doing this, I'm playing bass over here. I got a gig over here on this day. We have a client that needs this. Like so, we have recording a podcast on this day, right? We're sitting on this bench. It's a padded bench, and I had to put like 2 pillows underneath it.
Nice.
But thanks, man. Yeah, but and you know what? And just one more thing on carnivore versus non-carnivore prep, man. The difference between the two of them. This is the first time that I've been able to have glute striations and like actually like function and be a normal like person, because the last contest prep that I did, yeah, it was carnivore, but I was doing an insane amount of cardio. This time, not a step of cardio for the last month.
Yeah.
So everything's been diet, man. Like, and I just feel like a completely different person than I did a year ago. But that being said, I have a little bit of flexibility to gamble. So like if I retain water, like I'm okay with that. And like I said, most people expect guest posers to be big, but like not necessarily shredded. So
That's awesome.
this will
Good opportunity to test things.
Yeah, exactly. We'll see how it goes. And then there's David Mensarini and a couple other guys kind of want to do the same thing. Danielle actually is going to be going to be testing this out. She's competing. The lady that I was just telling you about, the WNBF Pro. She's going to be doing a competition in 2 weeks after this, and so we're going to be testing that. But we're really nervous about how like her gut is going to handle that amount of white rice and everything. And so obviously she's not going to be eating near as much rice as I am. So.
So what are you gonna do exactly? Like, what is your planned protocol?
I'm glad you asked. Yeah, I was texting him this morning. I don't think you've met him, but I train 2 people in person. Everybody else is online. And this guy, he's doing this show too. So he and we're on separate flights, but he's flying out in a couple weeks to compete at this show for a cash prize. So is Danielle. And I am, here again, guest posing. So anyway, we're on peak week together though, right?
Nice.
So, he already has the name of the restaurant all figured out, and apparently they have white rice, and I'm just going to go in there and say, look, I'm a bodybuilder on contest prep, and I'm here to eat white rice, and this is the meat that I'm going to eat with it. How much for the white rice? and I'm going to see what they say.
I like it. Do you have any idea how many grams you're gonna do? Are you gonna do it like every day that week, or just gonna do that?
I'll weigh it out. We'll see what kind of mood I'm in. Maybe I'll go live or something. But I'm gonna eat as much as I possibly can.
Yeah.
And then if I know I'm not gonna throw up. I mean, I've done it before. Like I can hold it down. It's just a matter of how. But that's what's fun about doing it on Wednesday, because we can like you can't screw up. Like if you do screw up, then you have time to fix it.
Yeah.
So
are you gonna play around with sodium then too?
No, I'm just gonna keep sodium in direct correlation with carbs.
Nice.
So,
well, yeah, like keep me posted, man. I'm curious. I love experimenting with things and seeing what other people are doing. So yeah, I mean, I think that's what makes people great. I mean, you just figure out what works, what doesn't work.
Definitely. As you're getting closer to show day, water, that's something that we really haven't talked about a lot. What I plan on doing is increasing my water all the way up through, typical of how most bodybuilders do it. I'm going to increase about a half gallon every single day up until Friday. And Friday, you're basically just drinking as much as you want. Last time that I did it, I got all the way up to 4 gallons. And I was basically, my coach and I both did it together. We both made it to 4 gallons, and we were basically drinking and peeing the entire day. But man, we got dry, like so dry the next day. It's a variable, and so I know it's just one more thing that like could go wrong. It's something that I'm kind of a fan of, so I'm just curious as to what your thoughts are there on that. Is show day I cut it off to sips, so I'm just like basically sipping water on show day and exogenous ketones.